Liam Neeson walked onto set without saying a word. He filmed his final scene, smiled, and quietly disappeared. But what no one knew is that he left something behind. A letter, a box, and a moment that changed one young actor's life forever. Stay with us until the very end, because what Liam Neeson revealed in his final moments will move you in a way no action movie ever could. It wasn't the noise that overwhelmed him. It never was. It was the silence in between, the moments when the crowd faded, the cameras stopped, and all that remained was a man alone with his thoughts. Liam Neeson stood just outside the soundstage, his hands tucked in the pockets of a long, dark coat. The morning air hadn't yet warmed, and a soft mist rolled low over the pavement like a curtain waiting to rise. Crew members passed him by, offering nods, unaware that today would be different. Not for them, but for him. Inside his coat, close to his heart, rested a folded sheet of aged paper. The corners curled from time, and the ink had bled slightly at the edges from being handled so often. It wasn't a script. It wasn't a letter from a fan. It was a promise. A note written to himself decades ago, back when he was nobody, back when he still doubted if any of it would work. The words weren't long. They didn't need to be. When I stop loving this, I walk away. No applause, no drama, just dignity. He hadn't read it in years, but today, as he stepped through the studio doors and into the glow of overhead lights, he felt its weight more than ever. On set, people were laughing, adjusting lights, running through lines. Another day, another action sequence. He moved through them like a ghost. No announcement, no farewell speech. He simply did what he had always done, showed up and gave everything. The scene was nothing spectacular. A hallway, a brief confrontation, a silent, intense look. Then an exit. He delivered it in a single take. Perfect, raw, real, but no one clapped. Not because it wasn't good, but because nobody knew. Only he did. As the director moved on, already focused on the next setup, Liam quietly stepped away. He didn't linger. No photos, no handshakes, just the echo of his footsteps down a dim corridor as he made his way to his trailer one last time. There, he locked the door behind him and stood in the silence. The paper. He unfolded it, read it slowly, let the words cut through him once more. His hands trembled. He wasn't a young man anymore, and for the first time, he didn't want to pretend he was. He sat, staring at the wall in front of him. It was bare, but in his mind, it was covered in memories. Fights staged in rain-soaked alleys, quiet scenes of loss and love, moments when his eyes told entire stories before a single word was spoken. But now, the camera would move on, and so would he. After a long moment, he reached for another piece of paper, crisp, white, blank. This one wasn't for himself. He began to write, not a script, not a speech, but something quieter, something meant to live inside someone else one day. Maybe not today, maybe not even this year, but one day someone would need it the same way he once did. And when he finished, he folded it with care. He placed it inside an envelope, sealed it, slid it into the pocket of his coat, and paused, because something still didn't feel done. He stood slowly and walked to the corner of the trailer. There, tucked beneath a jacket, was a small box, a prop from one of his earliest films, a gift from a crew member he never forgot. It wasn't worth much, but to him, it meant everything. It had survived the rise, the fall, the exhaustion, and the rediscovery of his own purpose. He placed the envelope inside the box, closed it, and stared at it for a moment, like saying goodbye to a part of himself. Then, without a word, he walked out. No one noticed him leave. The lot was busy, people moving everywhere, but he didn't head toward the exit. Instead, Liam veered right toward the shadows. toward a hallway where the old rehearsal rooms used to be. Because something had caught his attention earlier, something he hadn't expected. A group of stuntmen, guys he'd worked with for decades, were hanging lights in a small room, setting up chairs, whispering, hiding something. He'd seen it in their eyes. They thought he didn't notice, but he did. And now, as the hallway fell quiet behind him and his footsteps echoed softly forward, he knew exactly where he was going. Not to leave, not yet, but to listen. From the other side of the wall. He stepped closer to the door, one he hadn't opened in years. From behind it he heard his name. Not shouted, not called, but whispered with reverence. And what they said next made him freeze where he stood. The door was slightly ajar. Liam didn't open it. He didn't need to. Through the narrow gap, he could see more than enough. And what he saw was not for him, not officially, not publicly. But perhaps, in this quiet moment, it was. Inside, the room was dimly lit, not for drama, but for warmth. A soft amber glow from hanging bulbs illuminated the walls where photos had been taped, not production stills, but candid shots from years of filming. Behind-the-scenes moments, laughter frozen in time, bruised elbows, scraped knuckles, arms around shoulders. Most of them weren't of Liam, but every single one had him in it somehow, in the center or just out of frame, always present. The stunt team had gathered quietly. These were men and women who had bled for movies that bore someone else's name, who had taken hits, rolled down stairs, jumped from buildings, not for glory, but because they loved the craft. And they loved him, not the actor, the man. One of them stepped forward, a veteran of over 20 productions, his hair now grey at the sides. He held up an old prop, a battered leather jacket from a film that barely broke even, but meant everything to those who made it. And he began to speak, not loudly, not for show. His words were soft, but they carried the weight of loyalty. He told the story of a rooftop scene years ago where a last-minute stunt went wrong. The fall was mistimed. He should have hit steel. He would have broken his spine. But Liam was there. Somehow, he had moved faster than the safety crew, caught him, took the fall himself, bruised a rib, told no one. Until now. The room listened. No cameras, no clicks, just stillness. Another stuntwoman spoke next. Her voice trembled as she remembered her first job. Terrified, overlooked, doubting herself, until Liam, walking past, had paused and said something simple. She never said what he told her. She just said, "It was the first time I believed I belonged here." From behind the door, Liam stood frozen, not with pride, but with humility so sharp it hurt. He hadn't planned to stay. He hadn't planned to feel, but they were giving him something no premiere, no award, no box office could offer. Truth. Then came the final moment. A screen was wheeled out. Someone pressed play on an old laptop. The room went silent. A video began, fan after fan, young, old, voices cracking, smiling, crying, all thanking him, not for fame, not for autographs, but for hope, for making them feel brave, for reminding them that strength didn't need to roar, that quiet men too could be heroes. A little girl appeared last. She sat in a wheelchair, her arms thin, her eyes wide. She held a toy sword, plastic, chipped, faded. She whispered that her favorite movie wasn't the most famous one. It was the one where Liam's character lost the fight, but stood up anyway, and smiled. She said, "You made me feel like I could stand too, even when I can't." Liam's breath caught. In his pocket, the envelope pressed against his side like a heartbeat. He took one step back, afraid they'd hear him, but no one noticed. They were too busy remembering, and that's when he saw it. The small box he'd left behind in his trailer. It was there, scented, surrounded by candles, untouched. Someone had found it. Someone had known it wasn't just an object. Someone had understood. He didn't stay to watch the rest. He couldn't. Instead, he turned and walked away. But not toward the exit. He wasn't done. There was still one thing left to do, one face he hadn't seen yet, and one torch waiting to be passed. As Liam rounded the corner into the back hallway, he heard a voice rehearsing lines inside a forgotten dressing room. A young man, nervous, focused, alone. Liam paused outside the door, and with the weight of decades in his chest, he reached for the handle. The handle felt cold beneath his hand, not from temperature, but from memory. This wasn't just a door. It was the last threshold between who he had been and what he would now leave behind. He opened it slowly. Inside, the room was modest. No luxury, no entourage. Just a single young man, barely 30, standing in front of a mirror with a script in hand. His tie was crooked. His hands shook. He was repeating lines softly, trying to get them right, failing, starting over, and trying again. He didn't see Liam at first. He was too lost in the moment, too deep in the fear that every actor knows, that he wasn't ready, that the role was too big, that someone, somewhere, would realize he didn't belong. Liam didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had been that young man once, in a room like this, with a mirror that only reflected doubt. And now, watching from the doorway, he saw not just nervousness, but hunger, fire, that same raw desire that once kept him awake at night, praying for just one chance. The young man turned suddenly, startled. Liam simply nodded. No smile, no words, just presence. He stepped forward, slowly, and reached into the inside pocket of his coat. The envelope emerged first, white, sealed, untouched. He placed it on the counter beside the script. The young man looked at it, confused, but didn't ask. His eyes followed every movement. Then Liam opened the small box. Inside was the object he had carried for decades, a token no one else valued. A piece of a long-forgotten set. To most, it was nothing, a cracked compass, a prop. But to Liam, it had always pointed inward, reminding him where he stood when he forgot who he was. He held it in his palm for a moment longer, then extended it. The young man hesitated, then reached for it. Their hands touched briefly, and that was it. No speech, no grand gesture, just a quiet moment between one who had lived the story and one who was just beginning to write his own. Liam turned, walked to the door, and paused. For a second, he looked back. The young actor was still frozen, staring down at the compass, the envelope beside him glowing under the soft light like a secret waiting to be opened. And then, without a word, Liam left. He walked through the halls for the last time. The sounds of the studio faded behind him. Laughter, action cues, the rustle of scripts, all melting into memory. Outside, the air had shifted. The mist was gone. The sun had begun to set, casting golden light across the lot. Shadows stretched long, soft, and warm across the concrete. The kind of light that didn't demand attention, but deserved it. Liam didn't look back. He didn't need to. This wasn't an ending. This was peace. He passed the guard at the front gate. No fanfare, no cameras, just a nod of respect exchanged between two men who had seen each other more times than they could count. And then he was gone. Not into retirement, not into silence, but into something rarer. Stillness, a kind of stillness that comes only when you've told every story and finally understand that your own was the most important of them all. He didn't leave with noise, he left with grace. And sometimes the most powerful goodbyes are the ones where nothing needs to be said at all. If this story moved you the way it moved everyone who worked with Liam, leave a comment below and tell us what part hit you the hardest. And if you believe that quiet strength, dignity, and legacy still matter, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of that today. Finally, don't miss the next stories we're about to tell. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you the powerful stories you won't hear anywhere else. See you in the next one.